Hello everyone, my name's Joe Cuthbertson from the World Association of Disaster and Emergency Medicine. Welcome to podcast number 5 of Prehospital and Disaster Medicine. For today's podcast, we're engaging with the authors around their recent article, Airway Clearance Using Suction Devices in Prehospital Combat Casualty Care, a Systematic Review. They're from the University of Texas in San Antonio. I'd like to introduce you to Priya, Forhad, Lyle, and Robert. Maybe we'll start off with yourself, Priya. If you could give us a little bit of background around this research and what prompted this area of investigation for yourself and your team.
So I think Dr. De Lorenzo would be able to answer this question a little bit better because he is the one that approached Dr. Hood's lab with this research.
No problem at all. Robert, Dr. De Lorenzo,
Sure,
give us a bit of insight on the project.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to kind of open the conversation up. So, with my experience in the U.S. military, I was deployed several times to the Iraqi combat zone. I was very impressed with the array of medical equipment that the U.S. forces and the coalition brought to the combat zone. But there was a couple of gaps, and one was particularly glaring, and that was pre-hospital suction. The situation was really rather dire. The types of injuries that the soldiers, the enemy forces, and of course the civilians were suffering often were related to either gunshot wounds or more frequently, IED explosions. And these caused devastating injuries and in particular severe airway problems. And the combat medics, these are the first responders, essentially the EMT or paramedics of the military that are out there with the troops, carried their equipment on their back for the most part. And when they managed these airway problems, they did not use suction. And I had to figure out what was going on. And what they told me, almost to an individual, was that the electrical powered suction devices were simply too heavy. They worked fine, they were powerful, but they weighed on the order of several kilograms and just were not going to fit in their pack, where they have to carry literally everything around. And their packs already have 40-50 pounds of medical gear, not to mention their military gear. And then, of course, there were these hand, sometimes foot-powered manual devices that they irreverently referred to as turkey basters. And these devices simply did not work. They did not suck, pardon the pun. And the challenge was, even if you pump them really hard and fast, what they did is they consumed your hand power. Medics only have 2 hands. They don't work in big teams. And so they needed both hands to manage that casualty. And with 1, possibly 2 hands, working the suction pump, it just simply was impossible. They recognized this very quickly, and they didn't carry the stuff, and so there was this tragedy of non-use occurring literally throughout the entire combat zone. And I noticed, because we had a lot of interaction with the coalition forces, that they were really no better off. It wasn't a matter of discipline for these medics. I think they were doing the very best job they could. They simply recognized that the state of the art was not amenable to the environment they were in. And so when I got back, I left the military after I retired, and I knew I had to stop this problem. I had started my career in EMS and as a paramedic, and I remember the importance of suction. And I knew that there had to be a better solution, and so I dived in. But being a physician, I knew a team of engineers was going to be necessary, and that's where Dr. Hood came in. And he's a bright, energetic young engineering professor, and he had a team of graduate students that included Priya and Forhad. And together, we formed a team that decided to look into this problem. And so that's where things really got rolling, and that was a number of years ago. And now we've culminated it with some research and some papers.
That's a really interesting journey, Dr. De Lorenzo. So you've managed to identify this need out in the field, in firsthand, in fact. and you've come back here and with this team around you, you've managed to dive into the problem. When you've looked into the research out there, what were the main findings that the systematic review revealed?
So I'm going to have Dr. Lyle Hood talk a little bit about the current state of the art, about the different manufacturers that are out there, and what's available in sort of general terms. And then maybe Priya can comment on some of the specific findings that we found in our paper.
Happy to do so. So the state of the art for current portable suction systems are that the field really hasn't done any innovation in decades. When we started looking into this problem, one of the first things that we were fortunate enough to receive as a team was a National Science Foundation Innovation Corps grant, in which the primary focus, instead of developing a technology, is to go out and talk to potential customers and really delve deeply into the problem. And we had Rob's background in the military, his firsthand experience, but this allowed us to go from this military-only focus to going and talking to civilian EMS, as well as many other individuals that work throughout the emergency response space within the United States. And what we found was that this problem that Rob saw with the combat medic is replicated everywhere. That the technologies, they're either on wheels, or they're very heavy if they're electrically powered, or they're these turkey basters that can't move thick fluids like the kind of blood and contents of the stomach that need to be evacuated in a patient that needs this suction for their airway management. So the civilian EMS also have to carry a bag, and if they have to respond to a call that's on the 15th floor and they have to climb 15 flights of stairs, these suction units were left on the ambulance. We've published our findings in this paper, as well as a couple other papers and reports, and we've had many different groups reach out to us. EMS personnel giving us their own personal stories about how this is a dire need that they need addressed, as well as we've been reached out to by industry, and don't want to name drop too hard, but we've been reached out to by a startup company that's an offshoot of one of the real industry leaders in portable suction, and they were allowed by the company, the large company that has one of the largest market shares within the suction device market, is moving away from their line of suction devices, that it's just not an area of interest and innovation. They're going to other things, and their engineers that were developing these devices were basically orphaned, and so they go to their parent companies like, can we go start our own venture? And they got the blessing, and so they're developing their own venture where they're trying to innovate, but there's just not a perceived need at the industry level. And so that's one of the major things that our research in this paper is looking to address. Is we're trying to highlight the need and highlight the fact that there is both a medical need as well as a commercial opportunity to bring new vibrance to this space. And Priya can talk about the specific findings within the paper.
So in order to write this paper, we had to do a large kind of study on all of the research. We had to look up different sources and things like that. And what we found overall was that there isn't really a lot of information on airway suction devices for pre-hospital combat casualty care specifically. This includes, clinical trials, and just information about field use in general. There is not a lot of information out there. So it was slim pickings to write this paper. And we worked together along with, Dr. De Lorenzo's firsthand experience to write some reports previously, as Dr. Hood mentioned, and then kind of combined all of that research to come up with this paper. And out of what we found was we did kind of a consumer style report for the available suction devices that are out there now. And out of all of the suction devices that can be bought off the shelf, they don't meet a lot of the requirements that you would be looking for in a suction device that you can use in the combat field. Like, they are too bulky, they're too heavy. Basically, they're just a pain to carry around. So that's where we kind of delved into this paper.
It's an interesting finding, the fact that you've identified this need in the field, then cross-referenced it from the military setting to the civilian setting and found the similar need, a gap in the market space, and then combined with all of that, an absence of evidence within the military space to support suction devices. So tell me, like, from here on, now that you've taken this journey so far, what are the next steps towards solutions and hopefully providing better equipment or better outcomes in this space?
So we identified some of the key structures that we would need in a suction device that would provide the best care for field use, including volume that's needed for suctioning, optimal weight, optimal dimensions, and more importantly, the pressure that we would need to utilize a suction device that wouldn't injure the patient. Another important aspect of this is that not a lot of combat medics are specifically trained in suction, so it would have to be easy to use for combat medics. And then I will ask Forhad to talk a little bit more about suction device research that he's done to improve these things.
Thank you, Priya. Yeah, so during my first couple of years of graduate studies, I was assigned to develop a new suction device that would be more compact, lightweight, and fairly durable to withstand the harsh environment of combat situation. And also it needs to be powerful enough to evacuate the required amount of highly viscous liquid and semi-solid particles from the oral cavity very quickly. So as Priya mentioned earlier, we already did the market survey. We investigated the currently available product in the market, and we actually found that those products were specifically developed for suctioning the liquid or fairly viscous liquid. So it was if you try to evacuate any solid particles, then it would become a problem. It would clog the device. So we intend to develop this area. So we have tried different designs. Starting from the material to the suction pump and different accessories like the suction catheter. We investigated different particles, different components of this device, and basically we developed a prototype which is still under development. We are still working on this project. So we actually developed this prototype and we run different tests with this device, and from this findings of this device, we have published another paper on that. That is the characterization of the suction device that we published in another journal. So I would like to say that in this research, there is a huge gap, and we need to fill into this gap by innovation, by using modern technologies. And yeah, that's I think it's important.
Thanks, Forhad. And just reflecting on what Robert said towards the start of this podcast, he really identified a problem that really needs solving. So it's really nice how you've stepped through this research project and gone to market, identified the requirements. Do you have any thoughts on next steps from here?
airway obstruction is a pretty big field, not only including suction devices, but other ways to clear the airway. And Dr. Hood's lab is doing a good job at identifying all of the ways that this could be done and helpful in the field. So Dr. Hood, if you could talk about your research a little bit.
Happy to. Thank you, Priya. Yes, absolutely. So we have both a lot of exciting progress, exciting to us at least, in this development of a specific suction solution, as well as some broader research within the airway management space. This is something that Dr. Lorenzo and I are continuing to work on. So actually, a factoid that I should mention, that it's kind of surprising that there's so little attention on this, as airway compromise among U.S. forces, the second leading cause of preventable battlefield death. This is a recognized statistic, and so it's one of the things that we unearthed when we were really delving deeply on the problem. And portable suction is one part of that equation, but there's also the issue with the difficulty for medics to, well, anybody to perform endotracheal intubation out in the field. This is a process wherein they put a tube into the trachea and help a patient breathe. And the current endotracheal tubes that are out there are cheap plastic commodity that's made of a material that when it's really cold, it's a nice pick, and whenever it's really hot, it's a floppy noodle. And in the temperature controlled hospital setting, that's not as much of a problem as it is out in the field, particularly out in the field for combat medics. So we are looking to develop an endotracheal tube that does not have the sort of temperature variance, that has better methods of securement, that has feedback that allows the medics to know if they placed this tube at the right depth within the trachea, as well as whether if they accidentally place the tube into the esophagus, because they're having to do this visually in they can see that's important, but also, and for combat medics, it's a complicated scenario that's far from ideal, especially if there are bullets flying. And so it's easy to place the tube into the wrong pipe, basically. In addition, we have there's to do endotracheal intubation, there is a scope called a laryngoscope, which is this metal shovel blade that's not sharp, but has a light on the end and allows the person intubating to both visualize the area as well as to lift the epiglottis so that an endotracheal tube can be placed into the trachea. We have developed research to develop, instead of this laryngoscope, a glove that fits over a provider's hand, that extends the reach of their fingers. There's an alternative to using the laryngoscope, wherein the provider can just reach back with their fingers to feel for the tracheal opening and do intubation, but at that point they're at high risk of bite from the patient, who may be injured and is not in their right mind, and reflexes are working against them. So this is only done if a patient is very out of it. So what we're trying to develop is a glove with robotic fingers that come off of the provider's own digits, that have haptic feedback at the tips, so that they can actually feel the back of the throat while their own hand is still outside of the patient's mouth. So we have many different innovations that we're working on in this space. Now, I'm going to hand it off to Rob to talk about what we're doing as far as specifically in suction.
Yeah, so this is Rob Lorenzo again, and thanks, Lyle, for that overview. So a couple of things I think are important to point out. We framed this problem as a military problem. That was in part because that was obvious to me in my experience, and it was also the source of some of our funding. But I think the WADEM audience would appreciate that portable suction is perhaps a much greater pre-hospital care problem. Certainly anybody who works in an austere environment, far away from electrical power, residential electrical power, and has to carry all their stuff on their back or perhaps in a kit, will appreciate that portable suction is a major issue when it comes to resuscitation of casualties. And suction, of course, is an integral component of airway management. But there's other aspects of suction, I think, that folks often don't appreciate. Obviously, once patients are intubated, they require a periodic suction. Certainly, there's the need in the operating room and so forth and so on. And so, a versatile device that can be small, compact, and isn't amenable to cross contamination from an infection control standpoint. All those things are quite valuable, and these are some of the things that we discovered, and of course now that we're working on. So our lab is very active in trying to create lightweight devices that are small. Suction units, no matter what you do, are quite large. The tubing, even when you coil that up, can often take up 50% of the space of a suction unit because the tubing is fairly thick and heavy. All that doesn't seem to matter if you're in the hospital setting or perhaps if you drive to work, but for the folks that walk to work with all their stuff on their back, these small savings of weight and cube can be very important. And so designing and engineering lightweight and small devices is paramount. It is, after all, a portable device, luggable, maybe something that you can move around, but really isn't something that you're going to carry with you for more than a few meters. So that's what we're focusing on. We hope to work this out and provide folks with devices that they can carry and use in virtually all corners of the world, and don't have to worry about such things as whether this suction unit takes up valuable space that could be better taken up by other medical implements.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks to the entire team. There's some really interesting projects at work there. I'm really looking forward to seeing the research outputs around them and how innovation can assist in outcomes for patients in the future, both in the military and the civilian setting. Thank you all for your time today. Really appreciate that you've put the effort in to talk to our audience around your latest research. And I look forward to sharing with the crowd the next podcast event for Prehospital and Disaster Medicine. Thank you all again, and see you at our next podcast.